In this presentation module, we're going to talk about how you can improve your own levels of media literacy. Disinformation isn't going anywhere. The amount of media that we consume, that's not going to decrease either. So we have to stay vigilant when we're consuming media so that we can make sure we're making informed purchase decisions, being educated when we're voting in elections, avoid being manipulated by political parties and special interest groups, and that we can maintain a free and independent approach to our lives. We want to stay true to our authentic selves. We can't do that when we're being manipulated by media message creators. Keep the following ideas in mind when you're encountering media messages. Number one, recognition. The first step in being media literate is really recognizing the need for media literacy. Keep in mind that disinformation is prevalent in today's culture, in our social media driven world, our smartphone driven world. There's too much at stake politically, too much money to be made by the people creating disinformation and fake news for them to stop doing this anytime soon. So we're going to have to keep in mind that creators of media messages, whether they're political, commercial, etc. in nature, they all have a specific intent, right? Media messages are designed to get you to influence you to purchase something, to vote a certain way, or otherwise behave in a manner that you might not. Media literacy is really your key to defending yourself from being manipulated. One important tip here, seek news that comes from real journalists. We've got a whole module, whole presentation dedicated to this idea of the principles of journalism. If you haven't looked through that one yet here on the site, would definitely encourage you to do that. Remember, journalism has certain principles that it's been founded on, and those are focused on reporting the truth and serving the public interest without bias. Reporting according to journalistic principles means following rigid processes to ensure stories aren't reported without obtaining accurate information from multiple reputable sources. What does that mean? It means if I'm a reporter, I can't conjure up a story out of thin air. I can't build a story based off of a rumor. If I hear information, I need to go and get that verified once, twice, three times by reputable parties before I can take that out and publish it on a website, in a newspaper, on television, etc. We've got so many choices to get news from now, right? It comes through social media, it comes through the television, from streaming services, radio, newspaper, etc. But not all of them adhere to these journalistic standards. So we want to make sure that we seek out reputable news stations, websites, newspapers, and other sources that all display impartial reporting that aligns with the standards of journalism. We want reporters who are editing, fact-checking, verifying information, double and triple sourcing information. We want websites, television stations, radio stations, etc., that aren't showing clear political biases leaning towards the Republican side, the Democrat side, etc. We want impartial, kind of down the middle reporting whenever we can get it so that we know we're getting the truth. Avoid using social media, memes, and YouTube as a primary source of your news and information. Certainly natural to see a headline on Twitter or Facebook and click through that, but what you're not going to want to do is make that your only source of information. If you see a story on a social media site or that a vlogger is talking about on YouTube, feel free to consume that, but then also go out and look for other representations of that in your major news websites, television stations, etc., so that you know that you're getting the full picture of a story and that you're getting information from real journalists and real reporters. You're going to want to check to see if websites are legitimate, right? There's going to be certain sites that you know already, your CNNs of the world, you know that you can trust those websites based on their existing reputation. But you're going to encounter news, especially if you're getting your news from social media, that comes through websites that you've never seen or heard of before, and you want to check to make sure that these sites are actually accurate. It's become incredibly easy to set up websites that look like legitimate news sites. There's any number of different places you can go to build a site and in just a couple of hours have something that looks like an actual official news site with a domain name that looks real. So you want to be aware that that sort of thing's happening all the time and understand how you can defend yourself against it. Here's some of the telltale signs you can look at that'll help you understand, hey, the news site that I'm looking at might not really be a valid source of information. Try to seek out sites that have .com domains. .edu is certainly reputable as well. That's typically associated with schools, universities, etc. So if you're seeing those in the course of doing research on something, that's certainly something that's going to be trustworthy. .com Not every .com in the world is reputable, but more often than not, you're going to be able to trust a .com over a .net or a .com.co or something like that. If you're seeing a site that's using one of these other domain extensions, doesn't mean you can't trust them, but it means you should apply an additional layer of scrutiny. Do some other fact checking, some other searching around those. Look out for sites that use familiar brand names but actually aren't those sites. So for instance, look for CNN.com, not breaking-CNN.com. That's a real example that's been used in the past to push fake news out. Very common trick to take your well-known news organizations, your CNNs, your CBSs, etc., and put those into domains and then develop sites that have the same sort of look and feel as those more reputable sites. Does the site that you're looking at, does their article have an author identified with it? If they're not listing an author, that might be a tip-off that the content itself is fake news. So definitely take a look at that. Look at the headlines, look at the captions. Are you seeing misspellings in those places? When you think about reputable news organizations, whether that's a television station, an email, or a website, etc., they're all going to have teams and teams of editors who can make sure that not only is information accurate, but also that spelling is correct, grammar is correct, etc. Fake news sites aren't going to have those same sorts of resources, and it's very common to see misspellings rampant in the headlines, the captions, subheads, body copy, etc. So keep a lookout for those. And then we've also mentioned in some of our other presentations here on the site the power of a tool called Whois. Whois.com is a place where you can look up the owners of different websites. Quite often, your reputable sites are going to have a real corporation's name assigned to them that they're sharing out publicly. But if you're looking at this whois.com and you see something like domains by proxy, that's telling you that the owner of the site is actually hiding their name and information so that you can't see what it is. That doesn't always mean that that site is illegitimate, but it often is a site or a tip-off of something that's worth following up on more. You can also use Whois to see when a site was established. So if you're seeing a site that portrays itself as a news site and it just popped up in the last year or two, it could be legitimate, but it's definitely worth checking out a little bit further, right? Most of your big news sites have been in business for 10, 20 years, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you want to definitely make sure that you're looking at that. Search engines are really one of your best friends when it comes to trying to fact check information and root out fake news. If you're looking at a story and you're not quite sure if that story is real or not, search for the topic online or search for the topic itself plus fake or hoax, because there's a good chance if it is fake or a hoax that some other website is talking about it and calling it out for being fake news, for being a hoax, for being disinformation. So just a few little simple search things you can do there to try and verify the quality and accuracy of a story. There's also sites that have been specifically set up in order to check facts. There's a link here with some helpful sites. You can also just Google fact-checking websites, and you'll be able to find sites that have tons of articles where they've called out, inaccuracies and out lies that appear in different news stories. Search for more information on the authors of the articles themselves. What other sites are they writing for? What other publications are they writing for? Are these reputable websites? Are these websites that show any sort of a political bias? Pull up their social media feed. Pretty much any writer, reporter, journalist, author is going to have, a Twitter feed that you can check out, a Facebook feed, etc. And if they're posting anything that shows a political leaning one way or the other, that's a good tip-off that they're not that well trained in journalism. They're not interested in adhering to the standards, and that their reporting is probably going to reflect whatever bias they're showing you through social media. And then search for more information on the websites themselves that you're reading. If it's a website that you've never seen before, you can Google their name, and within a few seconds, if there's someone that's been responsible for a lot of fake news and disinformation in the past, there's probably someone who's written about it. So you can read up on some articles about that just by searching for their name or even the site's name plus fake news. We've got another section on this website that talks about conglomerates, media conglomerates, these companies that have acquired other media companies. And so it may start out as a television station, but it then becomes a television station that also owns a movie studio and a radio station and a theme park and a newspaper, all these things that can be woven together for them to push their messages out to you in a really big and impactful way. Once you start to stack media company and entertainment company on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other, they have a very powerful voice that they can use to convince you to buy their products, to vote whatever way they want you to vote, to think whatever way they want you to think, etc. So it's really important to understand the power of conglomerates and the idea that currently there's maybe 4 or 5 really big conglomerates that control a very significant portion of the media. There's a good chance that, whatever you're looking at online, that whatever you're watching on television is owned by something like Disney, Comcast, one of these big monoliths that owns all of these different things. Keep in mind, that they are interested in making profit. They're interested in advancing their own political agendas, and they will use all of these different vehicles that they've got to play them off of each other and try to influence the way that you think. Or perhaps to influence stories that they're reporting, right? So if one of their companies does something wrong, if there's a scandal, if there's a crime, etc., they can use all the other companies they've got to try to cover that up, to report on things a certain way, etc. So keep in mind what those relationships look like and what the impact of those relationships might be as you're consuming content that comes from conglomerates. Avoid content based on sensationalism and fear. The more sensationalistic and dramatic a headline or meme sounds, the less likely it is to be true. We've got a great example right here. Really two things with this. One, very sensationalistic headline, right? Anytime someone is using a word like, or a phrase like dropping a bombshell within an article or within a headline, that's going to tell you that they're not coming from a real honest journalistic viewpoint. The other thing to look at with something like this is any reputable news website is not going to use all capital letters in a headline. So keep that in mind. Some real clear tip-offs that this headline and this story are not real, not legitimate pieces of news here. But capital letters sell, fear sells, sensationalistic words sell, and fake news is about getting as much attention as possible, whether that's to generate page views that then allows them to make money off of ads, or whether that's by getting people afraid enough to vote whatever way they want, to think whatever they want, etc. So you're going to see a lot of sensationalism and fear used in media, especially things that come through social media. So be aware of that and don't fall into the traps that those are setting up for you. Going along with those, emotion is a real cornerstone of fake news content. Fake news creators are trying to structure their content around the things that they know their target audience loves or hates, not things that they're neutral on, right? So a lot of fake news that you're going to see out there gets aimed at the conservative audience. Just taking them as an example, there's certainly some that's aimed at liberals as well. But just looking at the example for conservatives here, you're going to see a lot of fake news that's aimed at them, that talks about things they fear, like socialism, immigration expansion, equal rights for LGBTQ groups, social reform programs. These are things that tend to oppose the political viewpoints and ideologies of conservatives, and that they're afraid that their opponents will introduce in a bigger way into society. So when fake news purveyors build out articles, videos, memes, etc., based on these things, they know they're going to get clicks. They know they're going to get views. This is just printing money for them. Conversely, they can say, hey, liberals are out to harm the Second Amendment, military veterans, police, tax reform aimed at the upper class. Those are all things that the conservative audience loves. The Second Amendment, they love military veterans, they love police, and certainly there are liberals that do as well. But these tend to be very hot button items for this audience. So it's easy to get them to click through to view a video, etc., if you're talking about potential harm to the things that they love. Really big idea there that these fake news folks are preying on your emotions. And another tip here, find the other side of the story. Don't read or watch just one account of a story. Look for other news outlets that are reporting on the same story, and then ask yourself these questions. Are there differences in how the story is being reported? If you've read, 2 different stories or watched 2 different videos about the same topic, look and see if there are big facts that were left out of one but are present in others. Look and see if the same sources are cited in both stories. That could certainly be a tip-off as well. Again, is there any important information that's missing missing from either version. And if you're consuming media around a product or service, not so much a news story, but this is an important area to fact check too, look at the online reviews and the ratings to see what others are saying outside of the people being paid to endorse the product. Say you're scrolling through Instagram and an influencer that you love following is recommending an energy drink or a new skincare line or something like that, and you're not familiar with it, please don't just go off of the influencer's word. Do some research online. There's plenty of information out there about pretty much any product under the sun, and you should be able to find ratings, reviews, etc. about those, so that you're not just taking the word of the influencer at face value. Those influencers are getting paid for everything that they're promoting to you. Their interest, unfortunately, is not with you; it's with how much money they can make. So, don't just take their word for it. Go do some additional research. And then the last tip here, share what you learn through this program and through any other efforts that you take to build up your own media literacy levels. As you build up your own media literacy acumen, as you become better equipped to root out fake news, to avoid disinformation, etc. Share that with friends and family. Educate them on why this is important, what they can look out for, the red flags, etc. Building up our communities and our personal networks to make everyone have a higher level of media literacy and be able to better defend themselves against these pieces of fake news and disinformation that are being put out there. That's going to build a stronger approach for all of us to make sure that we're operating with the truth and full sets of information. So share these different tips and tricks with them. And then after you've done that, keep an ongoing dialogue up to talk about why fake news is being created, how to avoid it, the fake news that you're seeing out there. Don't let your friends and family get trapped by these sensationalist headlines that you see. Share the tips with them and keep that conversation going. And that's going to help us all build a more media literate society. Thanks for checking this out, and wish you all the best.